Welcome to the Data Stack Show Shop Talk. Kostas, we have talked with people who built amazing data technology at companies like Netflix, Uber, and LinkedIn. But you and I actually don't record our talks about data very much, but we actually talk about data together a ton. And so Brooks had this amazing idea of just recording some of the conversations that you and I have before and after the show about data and our opinions on it. And really, this has been one of my favorite things that we do. So welcome to Shop Talk. It is where Kostas and I share opinions and thoughts on a personal level about what we're seeing in the data space. And it really is simple. We ask one another a question and the other one tries to answer it. So without further ado, here is Shop Talk. Welcome to the Data Stack Show Shop Talk, where Kostas and I talk shop about all things data and probably share too much of our personal opinions. Kostas, I believe that it's my turn this time.
It is, yes. Like, you can torture me as much as you want with any question you might have. I'm all yours.
Okay, I saw an interesting company launch. This was on Hacker News recently, and they call themselves a real-time API data connector. So you basically, like, I guess it's like they say like sub-minute, you know, sort of, you never basically have more than like sub-minute drift in between data sources. And I mean, I looked at it and it kind of just looks like it takes, this is just at a very, very high level. I haven't actually read the docs or anything like that, but just based on the architectural diagram on their marketing site, which we all know is the definitive source of truth for every product's architecture.
Yeah.
It kind of seems like, you know, almost real-time APIs are almost like a streaming ETL, if you will, right? Like what you would traditionally load in batch, you're now loading, you know, essentially in real time with sub-minute latency to some sort of data store downstream. Anyways, this got me thinking, and I'm really interested to know your thoughts on this. So there are multiple sort of streaming technologies in this sort of vein, right? You know, sort of, you know, you have like Materialize, right? Which is sort of, you know, streaming SQL. You have, you know, a number of other technologies. And one thing I'm interested to know is, do you think that these will get super wide market adoption, or is, you know, say sub-minute latency really only a problem for like a certain subset of companies? Or actually, I have a third flavor.
Okay.
Do you think that it will become so cost effective that it just doesn't matter, right? Like, why not stream in real time if you can, because it's cheap? Like right now, part of the challenge is like the infrastructure to do that at scales, you know, tends to be like pretty hefty.
I mean, but I don't know. I would disagree a little bit with that. Like, I don't think that it's that expensive to like start working with Kinesis system, right? Like they scale up and down. Yeah, like if you have a lot of data, obviously it's going to be more expensive, but if there's more data, it means that like there is a reason that you have more data there. Hopefully that represents also like that your business is generating more data.
Right.
It's a proxy of like your growth, right? Like,
yeah, I guess maybe another way to say it would be like cost has multiple vectors, right? Like if you just set up a set it and forget it, like 24-hour job that you never look at unless it fails, versus like managing Kinesis, like those are very different. Like,
yeah, I mean, okay, I don't know exactly like how Moving Lake works. Like from a quick look at the website, like,
oh yeah, Moving Lake is the tool. Thankfully, I didn't even mention the tool.
yeah, Moving Lake is
it's the end of the day.
Okay, first of all, we are talking about like a very early product, which means that like they are still trying to figure out like the product market fit, probably, right?
Yeah.
So we need to keep that in our minds when we are.
They're going to be batch ETL, traditional batch ETL in like 3 weeks when they pivot.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like for example, like if you go to the connectors, like and select like the Bank of America connector that they have, you will see that's like the entities that they support, like 3 of them that they mention here. One of them is real time, the other 2 are not, right?
Yeah.
And that's because obviously like Bank of America does not offer like a live feed over accounts and sub accounts, but it does over like transactions. So
yeah,
that's what you can get like in real time, right? I mean, there are like let's say inherent limitations with what like the systems won't like to expose in real time and whatnot, right?
Yep.
Like the way that I see it, like from what I see here, yeah, obviously like you can like push data from like your Bank of America API or account like to a database, right? But I don't think that like you're going to be generating that much data unless you are, I don't know, like, I mean, how many transactions a day you can have like on the bank account, right? Usually they're not like thousands, like maybe millions, let's so why I'm saying that, like what I'm trying to say is that real time, like we need, when we're like approaching these questions, like to start always like from the use case, like what are we trying like to achieve with these systems and how we are going to be using the data from the systems.
Yep.
Right. Like, yeah, like if I need like the transactions to consolidate, let's say all the transactions for my P&L, like at the end of the month or whatever, do I need to do that like real time? Probably not, right? Do I need like the transactions to like create a notification so like a, I don't know, like a salesperson can do something like as soon as possible? Yeah, is this as soon as possible sub milliseconds? No, we are still working with humans. Like they are not going like to react like that fast, right? Do we use these transactions like to do HFT, like high frequency trading? Oh yeah, like then, but then again, like we're talking about the completely different type of systems, right?
Yeah, that's a yep.
So real time, like traditionally, like streaming is one thing, real time is another thing. Okay,
Yeah,
like streaming and
such a
like
great distinction. Yep.
push over pull and like all that stuff, like it's like provide like different ergonomics around like working with your data, right? Real time has to do with latency, like how fast you have like to react to any piece of information, right? Let's say you are the system that scans the sky for inbound nuclear warheads from the enemy. You probably want like to react pretty fast, right? And you want to guarantee that, right? That it's going to be fast. You don't want like one time to be fast, another time like being a little slower, right? So it heavily depends like on like what are you trying to do with the data that you have, right? And what are like the notifications or like the real-time dashboards that you are going to build and who is like consuming them. So my question to you as like a marketer, which like one of like the very standard like go-to-markets strategies when it comes like to data, I was like, oh, marketing needs like real-time data. They need, I don't know, like sub-minutes latencies and stuff like that. Is it true? Like, what do you think? Like, what marketers need when it comes like to data?
Well, I would start out by saying I think that I do think some of these technologies are really compelling because, from a marketing perspective or even like a product perspective, you could do the analytic. You've been able to do like the analytics thing, like real-time analytics, say, for quite some time, right? I mean, real-time web analytics or real-time product analytics. You can sort of like there are really great products out there that do that. But also, as it's becoming easier to get more data, together and sort of to basically compute interesting things with separate sets of data. Some of the like infrastructure that actually allows you to compute some of this stuff, say in near real time, so that you get, instead of just observing like a user behavior and then seeing that in a dashboard, sort of with a direct line to like product analytics through whatever pipeline, you're actually doing some sort of compute along the way that includes additional data, which is really compelling, right? Because then you get a lot more insight downstream, even if it's in like, so let's just say it's in the same dashboard that you're looking at, right? But you have some sort of compute along the way. So that is very compelling because the amount of context and fidelity that you can get is way, way higher potentially. Still pretty hard to do actually, like technologically, or I mean, it's not like the patterns aren't a mystery, but it's also like a lot of pieces that you have to put together and run, and so I would say I agree with you that it really depends on the use cases, right? So let's take an example of let's like a situation in the real world where real time, or near real time or whatever. Actually, we should probably discuss like the definition of real time, because that actually is sort of at the root of the issue. Well, let's say you have some sort of app that, like a ride sharing app or, whatever, some sort of like transportation thing. Weather can be a really big influence on that, right? So if you think about like customer acquisition from a marketing standpoint, or app activation, right? Like we want to increase usage or get people beyond their first ride or first interaction or whatever that is. Weather can be a big driver for that, right? So rain is coming, go ahead and book your ride or schedule it or like whatever that is, right? From that standpoint, you actually need to like pull a bunch of data in, run a bunch of computes, and like in a pretty quick manner, like send out a message to certain users in a certain location, to sort of try to get them to take some sort of action, right? So you certainly need a ton of infrastructure in order to do that level of, kind of, let's call it like creating like a personalized experience based on a high level of context on those particular users' particular situation in a particular location. That also includes a lot of context around like their individual usage of your, service or whatever. So those things, sure. I would argue though that, the companies who will truly benefit from that level of detail, and that level of infrastructure tend to be like really large companies with really large user bases, right? Like that's not very common.
Yeah, I agree with you. What I would like to add, like especially because like we started talking about this because of what's the name of the
Moving Lake.
Moving Lake, yeah. And please, like, that's not like I'm not trying to say anything bad about them, right? That's just to make this clear. But
sure, all the Hacker News comments already did that for you, so there's probably nothing you can.
Yeah, like to be honest, like I have like huge respect, like for someone who is trying like to build something like this today. Okay, like it takes like a lot of how to say that, like it's not exactly like a easy to penetrate right now industry.
Yep.
Like there are many solutions out there, right? Like so I have like huge respect like for people who are trying to do that. And usually what happens is that like you need like to understand like a little bit how like you start a company, right? And how you start like building a product. Like you have like an idea in general, right? Like you know where you want to be, but at the same point, like you need at the same time, sorry, like you need to differentiate enough so you can have a starting point.
Yep.
Okay. So yes, you throw something out there, like you try like to create like a new way of let's say solving a problem. And that's like, let's say the conversation started with the market. That's what you see here. It's like a conversation starter. Like,
Yep.
hey, like we are solving this problem. Is it important for you? Cool. Come here. Like that's how we solve it. Maybe it's not like the right way to do it. Maybe it is. We don't know. But somehow you need to start, and that's what we see like here in a company like Moving Lake. And again, huge respect for what they are doing, because this is like the ugly part of like building a company where like everyone can easily have an opinion, right?
Yeah.
I can very easily say, okay, like this is going to fail. Yeah, obviously, like it's easy to say at this point that like it's going to fail, right? But that's not the point here. It's not like you're trying to, what you're trying to do is like start like a dialogue with the market until you figure out like what's the real opportunity and how like to shape exactly the opportunity in the market that you have chosen, right? In this case, is like data
Yep.
management. So that's how we should see these things. And yeah, now is it going to be like real time? Is it going to be bots? Is it going to be something else? Maybe it's both, right? We'll see. I think it is going to be like very, very interesting now that like we have like a first impression of like what Moving Lake is, like to revisit that like in 6 months on another discussion and see like where the product is in like 6 months from now, and see like try like to understand what happened in between, right? Like that's generated the changes that hopefully we are going to observe.
We really should do that. And we can like replay clips of this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they've raised like a huge amount of money and are super successful. And then they can
Yeah.
tell
And
us.
hopefully, yeah, like guys, if you're going to do that, like let us know. Maybe who knows, like might find like angel investors, you know.
Yeah. I'm not moving enough real-time transactions from my Bank of America account via API to write big checks yet.
It doesn't have to be a big check, like it can be a small check. Like, a check is still a check, right? Like
that is true. That is very true. I will say, for one, I'm excited. Like I'm bullish on real-time stuff. I think as the experience gets better and better and more accessible, like a lot of time, I mean, even in my job, it's like, yeah, we don't need to know stuff in real time, but it's really nice to. Like, it's really convenient. I think that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Like you can look at stuff too often, like looking at numbers too often can actually be unhealthy or a distraction. But when you think about things like campaigns that you're running or product launches or other things like that, it is kind of cool to see like, is there initial resonance? It's just kind of neat. I don't know. I'm excited.
Yeah, what I would add to this is that like moving data around in real time is not that hard. Like what is like much more complicated and where it's really like gets hard to set, let's say, very strict SLAs is like when you have to process the data.
Yeah.
In real time. Like if you want like to execute like very complex queries where you have, I don't know, like joins between tens of tables and I don't know, like how many like aggregations, blah, 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 like all these things. This is hard, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where like things start getting like really, really hard. So yeah, like moving the data around is one thing, processing the data and making them ready for someone like to consume is a completely different kind of problem.
Because that's really where all the value is created, though, actually, right? Like, is in, well, I mean, if you're trying to get some sort of insight that requires compute, like that's actually where most of the value is created when the data lands downstream.
Yeah, I mean, depends. Like if you're trying like to build a service that it's more like Zapier, let's say, right? Where you want like to trigger something when something happens. That's one thing, right? You don't need to do like any crazy kind of like processing there, right? Like it's more about like how many requests you can, like how much data, like in the unit of time, like you can process and turn into requests. Now, if you want like to get the data and also do very complicated analysis on the data, now that's a different thing. That's why we usually see like in this like the standard like the Lambda architecture, you see like you have like the bots and like the streaming or real time part of the architecture where like most of the use cases around the real time have more to do with like notifications, because in notifications usually you don't have like to go and process like a lot of like different data, do like a lot of wrangling around the data. It's more about like taking a look into the data and see like, oh, is this something like that I need to act upon because like the temperature is like higher than it should be, you know.
Yep.
Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, simplifying things too much, but um that's where you see like the like that. I think for everyone who wants like to understand better like the distinction between like the two paradigms, like studying implementations of the Lambda architecture and how like companies
Yeah.
did that and for what reason, I think it's an excellent like starting point.
Totally agree. Totally agree. All right. Well, Brooks told us we're at the buzzer. I could talk about this for a long time, but we have so many more shop talks to dig in. And next time it's your turn. So I can't wait to see what you ask. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one. You know, Kostas, we learned so much from the data leaders that we talked to, but I learned so much from picking your brain. And actually, your questions really make me think really hard. So I appreciate shop talk. I think it makes me a sharper thinker.
Well, it's fun. Like, I think it's good to just sit and chat about the stuff that we experience. And yeah, I think like, I hope like people enjoy it. That's why I'll keep asking for people to reach out. Please do it. Come on, folks. Like, you can do that. Like, send an email and
Yes.
let us know how you feel and like what are your opinions and like your experience with the show. So please do that. So me and Eric, we can keep being happy. Like, please.
Of course. And of course, we try to take the same types of questions to, you know, data leaders from all sorts of companies, large and small. So definitely subscribe to the main show if you haven't yet. Tons of really good episodes there, and tons of really good thoughts from data leaders, you know, really around the world. So definitely subscribe if you haven't, and we'll catch you on the next Shop Talk.